Allô, allô. Ouais. Ok. Non. Bon. Alors, bonjour à tous. Nous avons le plaisir, pour le mot d'accueil, d'accueillir le directeur général Jack Hammond, directeur général de simplification et digitalisation au sein du service public fédéral BOSA. I will speak in English today. So we welcome Director General Jack Hammond from Simplification and Digitalization Department in Federal Public Service, BOSA, Policy and Support.
Goeiedag iedereen, welkom. Nathanael, you said everything. Thank you very much to be there. I will just tell you some secrets. And Nathanael said, please don't do that, Jack. Every time you have to talk, you are revealing secret and secret and secret. You know, we had a very high challenge today. It's to know which type of sandwiches we had to buy for all of you. You cannot imagine the time we spent in the society to know what are the sandwiches we will purchase for everybody. Then we had with the AI team within BOSA a long discussion, how do we use algorithm to know what will be the things. And then one of the key things we were discussing is about do we push a certain type of sandwiches in the algorithm to know, for example, more cheese or more vegan or more beef or, you know, all those kind of things. And then we were making a number of iterations. And then afterwards, we raised the question is that we experienced that in a plane. There is nothing more frustrating than when you're in your plane at the end of the row and say, oh, we have pasta, we have pizza, we have beef and fish. But by the way, you have the choice between fish and fish. And, you know, when we discuss about all of that, you will understand when I was a young people, because today, Nathanael, we have people from the academic world. Welcome. We have people from governments and regional, local, federal. Welcome to my colleagues, and it's a pleasure to welcome you here. The collaboration between the different governmental agencies regarding AI, but you want to know more about my sandwiches issue, I know. Then I come back to the sandwich issue. When we would like to discuss about that, you want to make sure that when we propose sandwiches, we took into account the choice, the expectations of the people and so on. And then we are talking about how do we present sandwiches in the best way to everybody. It's really an ethical question. More seriously, when I was student, we were building the first algorithm. I always joking with Nathanael about we were creating algorithm to define how we can use neuronal programming, how we can use decision trees and so on and so on. Of course, we had not so much question at that time because we had no tools, computers and so on. And today we have a wonderful, wonderful capabilities. But at the same time, obviously, it's creating challenges. And this is why thank you very much for all of you to be here. And I would like to say a special thanks, of course, to all the BOSA team, and especially to the team who organized this conference, and also the people who will contribute today, like you, but also the colleagues from Agoria, Nathanael, of course, because I'm just doing the introduction. She said 4 minutes, and I understood from Nathanael 24. We're still discussing. But nevertheless, thank you to the AI team. For the ones who will visit the FOD BOSA, Federal Public Services BOSA, you will see that from time to time, we are transforming ourselves. We believe that AI is very important. We believe that connecting with the ecosystems in general, it's very important. We believe that working with our colleagues from different governmental agencies is very important. And that's why I'm happy that our colleagues are there today. When we see about AI every day, we see opportunities in the well-being of people, in society, in every field. But at the same time, a number of questions raised. This is why we worked at the federal level, and we will connect in the best way with our colleagues from different regions, because they do already a lot of things on AI, that we will try to combine all together our forces to deliver much more value to the society in general. But the second thing that we would like to make sure, and then it's something very important for BOSA, is that We want to be trusted. The trust is very important. When you have interaction with the government, you want to know what's going on. And our State Secretary, Mathieu Michel, did some political commitment that we will increase transparency, we will increase protection, and there are a number of initiatives to make sure that we are just gaining more and more, let's say, connection with the citizens, the enterprise, in society in general, and especially in the field of ethics and trust. Then you will have a long program that you will get explanations, but I have high expectations. We believe that AI can be used in the federal government, like in other governmental agencies, of course, for external and internal purposes. Internal purposes to improve the quality of operations and to make sure that in the back office we fulfill fully our missions. But at the same time, externally, that we make sure that we provide much more values to the society. And this is why we believe, and some people here from BOSA, they know, we are human, society-centric. We want to listen. And using AI, of course, is sometimes, it can be different views, using artificial intelligence in the process, as I said, external, internal, and it can be helping us to be more available, providing more services, and also getting more efficiency. But we need to make sure that we will respect a number of principles. Then my expectation is that at the end of the day, because we will close the door, you will not go out if you didn't deliver the charter, because I think that, Nathalie, you were building groups and so on. At the end of the session, we expect to have a project of charter that you will get more explanation about. At BOSA, we are federal, transversal public service. Our mission is to help the others. It's in our DNA. We help the others in everything. We help the others about recruiting and training civil servants. We are there to manage the civil servant staff in terms of social secretariat. We are there to help for general procurement activities for all public institutions, local, regional, by publishing, tendering, and so on and so on. We are there to provide a number of digital tools to the benefits of everyone in the society, citizens, of course, enterprise, and public services. And every day, we are proud to say, you don't know that you're using BOSA, because when you know, it means that we have a problem. We are very, very sensitive on the AI subject. As I said, under the leadership of Nathanael, that we will go through everything we have to do to make sure that AI will be used in the best way in the federal service. And last but not least, but sometimes people less like us, we are also in charge of the budget of the state. And then sometimes, of course, we have to discuss within BOSA about the budgeting. But nevertheless, we help also the others to try to identify the budgeting issues, how we have to report it, or to get it more transparent to everybody in the society. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for all your activities that you did at the academic world. Thank you for all the practices that we see already in the society, in the private sector. Thank you to be here today to help us to build an ethical charter for the public services. Because as I said, trust is important for us, and we want also to be showing the example to everybody in the society. Thank you very much, Nathanael. Thank you very much, Nathalie, and thank you to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jacques, for this 4-minute introduction. So let me see if this clicker works. There we go. This was Jacques, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. So, also on my behalf, thank you everyone for being here. It's really nice to see so many of you, and especially to see you physically here, as well as online. So it's great to have such a big turnout. And what you see projected right now is the program for today's session. So after the welcome words of Jacques, I will also give a few introductory notes on why we believe this project of working towards a charter for the ethical use of AI in public administration is important. This will be complemented by further notes on the same topic by Rob Heijman from Kenniscentrum Data en Maatschappij. Then we will have a panel discussion with representatives from all the Belgian regions to hear their perspectives on this project as well. And then, and this is what you might see for the people here in the room on the sheet, we will break out into different sessions. So it's important for the people following online from the workshop part onwards. We won't have a streaming anymore because we will be moving in different places in the room to really get a first input on what is important in this project of drafting an ethics charter for the use of AI in the public sector. And as Jelle will explain later, the color codes are important, so bear that in mind. And then we will have some closing words and wrap up. Good. This is a very important slide because it's the AI for Belgium Ethics and Law Board who is behind the organization of this event. As you know, AI for Belgium has different working groups covering both horizontal themes and vertical or sectorial topics. One of these horizontal topics is ethics and law because it's just so important in every sector in which AI is being used. And so besides myself, Jelle Hoedemakers from Ihoria is co-leading this working group with me, but you see other board members, Nathanael Akkerman, who I already mentioned a few times, Rob Heijman from the Yves Poulet, from the University of Namur and also representing Digital Wallonia, Nele Roekens from UNIA, a human rights organization, and then Karl Morg from the FARI Center for the use of AI for the common good. So this is the team, and we will also be guiding you through the process and the workshop phase today. Okay. With that out of the way, let me dive into the content of why we are here today. I'm going to take off my Ethics and Law Board hat and put on my KU Leuven research hat for some brief introductions because the use of AI in the public sector is actually my research domain. So it's very nice for me to be able to talk to you about that. First of all, some introductory points. When we talk about the use of AI in the public sector, it's very important to note that the public sector has perhaps an even larger obligation than private organizations to make use of tools in an ethical and responsible manner. Because unlike private organizations, the public sector needs to act in the public interest. Right? It's companies strive profits, it's their goal, and that's fine. The public sector is not meant for that. They need to strive towards the public interest. I think we can have long philosophical discussions on what the public interest is, and we might disagree, but it is an important point to keep in mind. And the use of AI in the public sector is a goal that we see in all national strategies on AI. Whether we take the Chinese AI strategy, the American one, the French one, the Belgian one, which we also have, the use of AI in the public sector is a very important point in that. Why? I probably don't need to explain that to you. There are a lot of benefits attached to the use of AI. Personalized citizen services, also in the back office, right? Jack already mentioned both internally and externally, cost savings, speed, efficiencies of scale. We could serve the public interest in a better way by making smart use of these tools. And sometimes it's also seen as a matter of economic survival, because we do have across Europe an aging of the civil servants population. This is something we need to take into account. There can be backlogs in filing, and there are often budget cuts, which we see throughout Europe. COVID didn't help. There is a war situation in Ukraine which doesn't help. And these are realities that need to be faced. And so it's understandable that we try to make use of the most efficient technologies in order to counter some of these issues. What are the roles that the public sector can take in AI? Because the public sector has different roles it can take. First of all, it can be a developer or user of artificial intelligence. And that is probably the topic we will be talking about most today. For instance, public welfare services. A lot is already being automatized there. In law enforcement. Think also of migration services. At the same time, the public sector can also be a catalyst for the uptake of AI in other parts of society. For instance, through public procurement. It can incentivize the development of AI by private and other companies, or by giving subsidies, right? That's also a role that the public sector can play. And then the third one, which is something that I also focus on a lot in my research, is the government also needs to be an AI rule maker. It needs to ensure that there are proper rules in place, to the extent they're not already there, to ensure that citizens are protected against the potential negative consequences of AI, and also to make sure that users and developers of AI, be it in the public or the private sector, that they have some certainty about, okay, what should I do? How can I comply with the law? What are my legal obligations when I'm using and developing AI? And some important things that public administrations should keep in mind when they want to make use of these technologies is it's not always easy to find qualified personnel. This is a bit of a pain point that needs to be addressed. This also means ensuring that civil servants are educated about these new technologies, about how to use them, and knowing how to ask critical questions about them, so that they can use them in a more performative manner. Government also needs to ensure that it can attract and keep in-house experts, especially knowing that the private sector might sometimes pay them much more. Another point is that sometimes public administrations can be dependent on private organizations for the development of these tools if they don't have the skill in-house. And that raises also some questions on responsibilities and on policies and guidance. There can, in that case, be an asymmetry of information, because the developers will have more information about how the tool works than the public sector users. And of course, when we talk about the public interest, this rings a bell. And the design choices are very crucial there. Right? We all know by now, I hope, that the way in which AI systems are developed is not neutral or bias-free. We all have biases. Society has biases. These will be reflected in the AI systems that are used. And it's a responsibility to make sure that these biases are not unfair or discriminatory. And to make sure that the design of the system does not impact privacy to a large extent. So the design choices are really crucial, but often these design choices will then not be taken by the users of these systems, which are civil servants, but by the developers, which might be outsourced again. And another point to keep in mind are transparency obligations. Since the public sector serves the public interest, there are high standards of transparency, and it's normal. Citizens should have the right to have transparency there. And that means that there is, for instance, a right to access to information about public sector use of tools. But that raises questions because we first need to have documentation in place about the AI systems that are being used in order for citizens to make use of their right to get more information. So all of these things should be kept in mind. Now, some more reflections that I want to share is that because of what I just mentioned, the public and private is often interwoven, because the public will often rely on the private sector and vice versa. So the line should not always be drawn too strictly. At the same time, remember, the public sector has a higher responsibility since it serves the public interest. One of the things I try to caution for, based on my research, is that we need to be careful with the paradigm of we can solve everything if we just let the data speak. It's true that advanced data analytics can bring interesting insights, but we need to be very careful there, because there is a difference between things that data can show us, bearing in mind that data is always a partial reflection of reality. You will never have data of everything that's going on in reality, and things that we normatively want in our society. The data could, at best, show us how certain things are, or could predict how certain things might be if we do this or that. But it cannot tell us what kind of society we want, what we should do. There is a distinction between the positive and the normative, to say it in philosophical terms, or between the is and the ought. Another point we should be a little bit careful for is techno-solutionism. Right? Today there is an app for almost everything. I'm sure you have plenty of apps in your smartphones. And of course, technology can help a lot, but we need to make sure that our excitement about the great things that AI can mean does not get us carried away by thinking, okay, we have AI, what can we do with it? And rather think, okay, we have these problems to solve, or these issues where we could require help. What could AI or other tools mean for us to achieve these goals, and not the other way around? What can we do now that we have AI? Yes, there are many advantages to the use of automatization in AI systems, but We also need to be careful because it's not automatically that when you rely on AI systems, that the time you save is actually used in a more precious way, right? We often hear that if civil servants use AI, they will have more time to really interact with the citizen. And that sounds great, but then we need to make sure that the time that is freed up is really used to interact with citizens and not to take even more files. Right? So it's not an automatic thing. It's something we need to make sure happens. And when we talk about benefits of AI, we also need to take into account benefits for whom. Because sure, there will be people benefiting from it, but we also know that those who are already most vulnerable in society are often the ones who will most disproportionately be affected by potential negative consequences. So benefits, sure, but always ask the question for whom. And it's a responsibility to make sure that these benefits are evenly distributed. And a final point I want to make here is that a suggestion is rarely just a suggestion, right? Probably you've heard of the term keeping a human in the loop, making sure that there is a human being who can keep oversight over what is happening with the decisions, and that the AI system only gives a suggestion. And then it's a civil servant who makes the final decision. But here as well, it's important to look at reality. Because it sounds great on paper, but if this civil servant has only limited information about how the AI system works, and if they have a lack of knowledge, backlogs, pressure to deliver, KPIs to meet, time pressure, then a suggestion will not just be a suggestion. Because it will take more time for the civil servant to argue why they don't want to follow the AI system than to just follow the suggestion. So this is something to keep in mind as well. And then across the world, we see that there is more and more use of AI systems also in the public sector, but that also brings challenges. I'm not going to go discuss them in details. There is no time for that, but I just wanted to pinpoint some of them. I'm sure you have heard of some, and you can read more about others. And I think it's just very important that we make sure that in Belgium, we try to avoid these pitfalls. Yes, we want to make more use of these systems in the public sector, but it needs to happen in a way that does not repeat the mistakes that others have made. So what are some of the challenges? And this is something I'm hoping we can also take in the discussion afterwards when you talk about the content of the charter. When we use AI systems in the public sector, there will always be a translation exercise from a policy or a norm or a law to code. Right? Because we will codify certain norms. But this is a translation exercise where there is some discretion. How you translate something from text to code, which is binary and leaves less options, it's a normative decision. It's not a black and white decision. So it's very important to know who decides how we translate, who translates, who makes sure that the translation from a law that was voted democratically in parliament and that is then executed by the executive also happens in a correct manner. Another point to watch out for is, of course, the fact that AI systems use a lot of data, and this can have an impact on privacy. I'm sure I don't need to explain that. Opacity is another point to be mindful of. Not all AI systems, but some AI systems are opaque in their inner workings. We don't always know, and even experts don't always know, how a decision comes about. And that can be externally, right? But even the experts don't always know. And remember what I said, civil servants might also have opacity because they rely on a system from a private sector. So we need to ensure that this opacity does not stand in the way of oversight from the civil servant using the system, but also oversight from the legislator and the judiciary over what the government does. Risk of errors and mistakes. Human makes mistakes, but so do AI systems. They can be biased too, and the important thing is here the scale. Now, if I make an error, usually it will be limited in scope because I'm just one human being. But if we have a centralized system that makes a problematic decision for the entire population, this scale makes it much more important to take into account. Software can be adapted easily, also behind the screens. Again, something we need to be mindful of. And what happens with administrative discretion? Because if you codify a system to take certain administrative decisions, discretion moves upstream with the developers of the system. and might be taken away, or at least less present on the level of individual civil servants. And again, I'm not saying this is necessarily a problem, but it changes some things, and this is something we need to take into account as well. We need to ensure responsibility. And the fact that no human intervention is needed when decisions are being made by the administration when they rely on AI might also mean that there can be no criticism about a problematic decision. This is what we saw in the Netherlands, for instance, with the child's benefit scandal, where some civil servants say, okay, this does not make sense, it's not fair, but they just relied on the system. And then the last point I want to make, very important to have citizen involvement and feedback. Because it's important that when public administrations use AI systems, that they also get involvement from citizens on should we use them, how, does it work in a way that really benefits the public interest. This concludes my introduction, and this is why, for all of the reasons that I set out now, this is why we launched this project. So putting back the AI for Belgium hat on, what are the goals of this potential ethics charter for AI that we are talking about today? It's not the idea of reinventing the wheel. There are ethics charters out there, there is some legislation out there, but it's about making sure that we can translate that to the context of the public sector, because general ethics guidelines still don't necessarily help civil servants when they want to make use of AI systems. We want to make sure that we can empower civil servants that use these systems, making sure that we reduce uncertainty as to how to implement it in a responsible manner. We want to raise more awareness about the fact that there are these ethical issues, and also provide a clear signal to citizens that this is something that public administrations take seriously, that they want to be responsible about it, and lead by example. And finally, we also want to make sure that Belgium is put on the map as a country that not only boosts innovation in AI, but also does it in a responsible manner. As we heard, the federal level is already on board, and we will hear about that in the panel discussion as well. There was a mission letter from the Minister de Sutter and State Secretary Michel, on which you'll hear more. But the idea here is really to bring everyone together. It's important that we all reflect on it, regardless of the region that you're from. This is the timeline of the project. We will come back to this at the very end of the session and explain it in a bit more details. But let me here just say that this is not just a one-time event that we do and then that's it, you won't hear from it again. It's a long-term project. This is the first meeting where we are going to get the first input from you to start drafting, and there will be other moments of consultation, getting your feedback. And with that, I'm going to hand over the floor to Rob Heijman. Thank you.
Hello everyone. There's a car, UWZ 387, and it's blocking the whole garage. So I'm gonna repeat the number plate. UWZ 387.
We will all close our eyes so that you can leave the screen.
No? No one? Not here? Okay.
Okay, good. Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. I'm really happy to see you here, either virtually or physically, because I hope we share the same mission. I'm from the Knowledge Center Data and Society, and our mission is quite simple. We wish to make sure that legal requirements and ethical guidelines or frameworks are easily translated into practice. Because there's a problem, they are not always easily translated into practice right now. Today we can change history because we're still writing a charter or thinking about a charter, and we can make sure that it is understandable from the beginning, so that I, with my knowledge center, which is part of the AI Flanders program, don't need to translate it afterwards. Just make sure we do it right from the first time. I also share a lot of good news today. First good news is we're all here together, which means you think AI ethics is important, and that's good news. Second good news is that there's already a lot being done about AI ethics. We have a lot of guidelines internationally. At the European level, we have neighboring countries already producing charters and guidelines. Even regions and cities are producing guidelines. So a lot is there already. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, as Nathalie already told us. And we have a lot of really bad and good examples to learn from. And that's the first cautionary tale. There are a lot of bad examples or things that might go wrong with guidelines and ethical charters. If you look at the literature, one of the first ones is that the principles we select are the ones that are easily operationalized. There is a lot of focus on bias. Why? Because it's data related, and the people working in AI like to work with data. So they will focus on what goes wrong with the data because that's what they can control. That's a good idea. I don't mind that. But we also need to look at the other principles that are not that easily transformed into mathematical formulas. So be wary of that. You see a lot of guidelines that focus on the technical principles only. Also look at the more difficult principles, even though they are more difficult. Then the second one, guidelines or charters are too abstract. Well, that's sad because you know companies that say we value your data, but not in practice. If your guidelines are too abstract, this is what you are going to get. People might misuse them strategically. What I also see when we are guiding people to apply ethical guidelines is that they are too abstract and they just don't know what they need to do and when it will suffice. Did they reach the target everyone expected them to reach? Well, we don't know because it's too abstract. And then a second or third challenge is AI ethics is a bit biased in itself. There's a bigger platform for ethics thinking about innovation, and ethics about innovation is also important. So even though we're today focusing on an AI ethics charter for public governments, I hope you can also keep in mind these challenges and zoom out a bit. Other good news, I want to inspire you on what are, according to me, good ideas to put into charters. Well, the first one is you cannot just put all your hopes in ethical guidelines or charters. You need something around it that supports it. And that's a strategy. We can work today on this ethics charter, but I hope when you go home, you'll also pressure politicians or whoever else wants to listen that we need a strategy as well. We have starting strategies. Mathieu Michel published one. We have a few strategies in Flanders, and I know there are some in Brussels and Wallonia as well, but we don't have one specific for public governments yet. So we need to work on this. Why? Because if we have a strategy, we will have other supplementing measures that should also make sure that these guidelines or charters are easily implemented. And that means having tools, but also time and effort to work on these things. You don't want to know how many times I've been asked to help someone with ethics, where help literally means we don't have money for you and we don't have time to listen to your feedback, but we hope you can help us. I hope you see this mistake and why ethics will not work when you approach it in this way. And then lastly, and that's really important, your guidelines or charter needs to inspire concrete actions. Actions meaning deliverables and efforts again. You don't just want it to be principles and intentions. At the end of the day, there should be something in a deliverable related to ethics where you made a change. And that brings me to the good examples. I only have good ones. So when we look at good practices, I looked at our neighbors in the Netherlands. They made a really nice principes voor de digitale samenleving. And in that, there are some really good examples we can use, like the first one, they have very clear rules on which they had to make a lot of arguments and have big discussions because they're very specific and very difficult to misinterpret. When you say you're never going to use a certain technology, that's quite clear. I think today, or in this trajectory we are all embarking on together, it's really important to go for these discussions. Let's try for once not to go for the Belgian compromise, but really go until we are very clear on what we really want and what we really don't want. Another really good thing they did at VNG and in the Netherlands in general is they don't just add principles and sub-principles, they also refer to other actions that need to support these principles. They say transparency is important. Everyone says transparency is important. The real question you need to ask is, what are you doing to be transparent? And is it clear for everyone? Having an algorithm registered with a standard that explains what transparency should mean will help, because everyone understands what you mean by this specific form of transparency. So that's a great practice. Then the last one, I saw from our work at the Global Partnership on AI and the Responsible AI Working Group, the World Economic Forum presented their work on AI procurement, which is also a really nice idea, looking at the processes you are already using and checking how you can implement ethics as a thought during your existing processes. This is way more cost efficient than starting something from the ground up, such as an advisory board or an ethical deliverable, all at the end of a project. Putting it at the beginning, putting it in existing processes makes the most sense and will save the most time. So I hope I have inspired you just a little bit for the upcoming panel discussion and your own brainstorm. Thank you.
So, all right, that was the introduction. We're going to take quickly 2 minutes to set up the panel, but as a lot of things were already mentioned, I see a lot of frowning faces, take some time to reflect a bit, write down your thoughts, because that is what we want to gather later on during the workshop. So, yeah. So I would like to call on stage our 4 panelists. First up, we have Yves Boulet, who was already introduced. He's Professor Emeritus from UNAMUR and the founder of CRITS, and also part of the AI for Belgian Ethics and Law Board. Next, we have Laura de Keyser, who works at the AI Competence Center for Digital Flanders. We have Laura Natalis, responsible for Numérique Responsable for Brussels Environnement. And we have a person who doesn't really need any introduction, but still, Nathanael Akkerman from AI for Belgium. So, to kick things off, each of the panelists will do a short setting the scene. But from my side, a bit of a comment that we have here people with different backgrounds. These are not necessarily representing a specific region or making statements. Please see their contributions as a bit of a starting point as well for the discussion. So first up, Yves, I'd like to call you here.
Okay, do you
yeah,
want to come
you
back?
can come here. You can give that to me.
Yeah.
And your slides are here. So please keep it at 5 minutes if possible.
If possible. Yeah. So I do suppose that I have to do that. Okay, so I push there. That's okay. So, thanks, Altiel, for introducing me. I speak on behalf of Digital Wallonia from the Walloon region. And as you know, Digital Wallonia has developed a certain number of initiatives as regards the AI. I do suppose that's AI. Okay. I have called that more hopes than facts. Nevertheless, I think that I have to notice that there are a certain number of initiatives already taken by Digital Wallonia. And the most important is definitely the fact that we have launched a consortium between the 5 universities and a certain applied research center like CETIX and ARO and all, in order to develop innovative projects and innovative research on AI. And it works very well. The second point, more specific, is the fact that we have launched a certain number of programs, like you see START AI, Trampoline AI, and
CAP AI. And certain of these initiatives are dedicated for public service. Tremplin AI as a specific branch as regard public service. And I would like to add, and I do suppose that Isabelle Rawart is there from Agence du Numérique, that most of this project have been developed in the context of smart cities, which is a clear meaning that smart cities are definitively a very good point for the development of AI. That it is in that context that we have been asked for producing a report about AI and public authorities. And in that context, we have published a book. It was a demand from Digital Wallonia to the CRITS, and the CRITS has published this book, and we have there more than 80 recommendations, and certain of them are about the creation of an ethics charter. So I come now to the speech itself. 3 keywords. I think that's very important to have that in mind and to see how these 3 keywords are developing what we might call a sort of global governance of data in the Walloon region. The first one is definitely the data sharing. It is quite clear that if we want to develop AI application, we need to have a better transmission of data between the various components of the public service. What I do mean by public service is not only administration. I think that's very important to take into consideration other components of the public sector. I mean definitively what we call the public service organization like Forem, ARES, AVIC and others. I think that's very important to have that in mind, and it's also very important to have in mind the smart cities we have already spoken. In order to develop this data sharing, we need to have a good data cadastre and the use of the FAIR principles. You know, FAIR principle, findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability. Better transmission means better transmission between public sector and private sector. And as regards this transmission between private and public sector, it is not only the obligation for public sector to give a certain number of data, the data collected by the public authorities, to the private sector, but it is also, and it has been enacted within the Data Governance Act, the fact that in a certain case, private sector must also offer a certain number of data to the public authorities in order to define public strategies, like as regard mobility, like as regard public health, like definitively as regard employment. This is what we call reverse PSI. That better knowledge of the data resource of the public sector need not a centralization of the data, but a central governance of this data. Where are the data? Which data and metadata in which format? It requests also a consistent approach of the data strategy as regards the Walloon region. And the recent nomination in Walloon region of a CIO is definitively very important on that point. The second keyword is assessments. This second keyword is balance or counterbalance the first one. If we want a more efficient and intelligent public service to be able to better dispose of data, whether personal or not personal, this possibility requires that the public sector questions the precise objective they are pursuing and the need to achieve them, this objective, through AI application. Do we need an AI application for recruiting civil servants? Do we need a machine learning system in order to decide the sandwich we have to receive? That's a question we have to put within this assessment. This assessment must be done from conception, from design, to exploitation. It means a continuous assessment and must be multidisciplinary in order to consider all the positive and negative impacts of the application and the risk linked with its deployment. Oh, on that point, certain choices must be done. Do we put into place internal multidisciplinary evaluation body, or do we prefer an external audit by an independent organization? That's to be discussed. The Altai list proposed by the high-level group of experts on AI ethics in July 2020 definitively ought to be taken into consideration. Two complementary remarks at that point. First, it is very important that we consult all the stakeholders, the civil servants, the citizens, and definitely the companies affected or beneficiary of the AI application. Second point, at our point of view, the evaluation would require both transparency and data protection analysis. And we think that it would be very interesting that we create the Region Walloon independent authority combining these two issues. The model used in certain regions in Germany or in certain countries might be evoked on that point. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. The third key point is definitely transparency. And transparency might be developed in three different facets. The first one, it is quite clear that any decision to implement AI system must be published as well as its evaluation report. The second is the publication in open source of algorithms underlying the application is definitively to be done. And the third one is the granting to physical or legal person affected by AI decisions to have the possibility to obtain a human explanation in an understandable language of the decision taken, and second, to have the possibility of recourse against this decision. I will not comment the challenges for a sustainable public service AI. You know that. I would like just to underline the last one, and it is clear that it was already developed by Natalie, but it is very important. I think it's very important that we have at the federal and on the regional levels an evaluation of the impact of application by public debates about certain AI application, and that's very, very important. The other ones are very well known. Having said all that, do we need an ethical charter? The example of the Smart Region and Smart City Charter, developed commonly by Agence du Numérique and the Union des Villes and des Communes, is a good example of the interest of such a charter. Thus, yes, we need a charter, because otherwise it is quite clear that the fascination for technology will be such that we will put at risk our individual liberties, the social justice, and the democratic functioning of our society. But what we need, it is an enforced and respected charter, including by furniture of algorithmic solution. In the context of public procurement, it is very important that it would be a condition for furniture to respect the charter. Definitely, we need trust in our technology. We must govern with AI and not by AI. Thanks a lot, Jel.
Thank you, Yves. So next I'd like to ask Laura to come to the stage.
Hello everyone, thank you for having me. I think you had a sneak peek of my slide just moments ago. My name is Laura de Keizer. I am in charge of the creation of an AI competence center within Digitaal Vlaanderen. Oh, of course, I can move closer to the mic. In charge of the creation of an AI competence center within Digitaal Vlaanderen. And I wanted to highlight a few principles that we are using for building that AI competence center. The first being that we want to make sure that we build it on use cases that we know and we see in the market. A second one is that we want to build further on the strengths we have. Within Digitaal Vlaanderen, we have a few strengths. We are used to work with data. We're used to all the juridical and security issues that comes with working with data. We're also a trusted third party within Flanders, within the region, and we want to build further on those strengths. And then the third one is that we want to continue to work with the current partners we have. And when I say partners, I mean all our customers, which are usually Flemish entities, local administrations, but also partners, which can be regional or federal. And then the third one, and then we're coming closer to the subject of today, is that we want to make sure that we have a strong governance in place. And when I say governance, I think we're used to work with data, so we think data governance. But of course, we're also thinking about AI models and governance around that. But then, and I think it's highlighted on the slide, we also see the ethical framework as a basis or as a very important part of that governance. Then the two next ones are reusability. We're used to building blocks, is that a good way to say it? To create building blocks and or reusable components, and we want to continue that. So the AI Competence Center will create components that will be reusable. And then of course a very last one that had to be in there for our director, let's say. We have quantified objectives, so we know what we want to achieve with the AI Competence Center. So that's a brief intro to how we want to build the Competence Center. I think if we look at ethical AI, then we know that it should be part of all the projects we do. So it should be part of the projects from our customers, being Flemish entities or other partners, but it should also be a part of what we as Digitaal Vlaanderen, our mission is to bring digital transformation to the region. So it should be a part of what we do too. Another question I think that we want to answer today is what we want to achieve with an ethical AI charter, and then we have a few things. We want to be prepared for new legislation. Well, that's a difficult word to say for me. Automatically thinking about the AI Act. But we also want to make sure that all our entities, the whole region, can use AI in a societally acceptable manner. That's the most important point for us. Of course, it says here the guidelines in the charter should coincide with what we, as Flanders, see as a strategy. I think that speaks for itself. It should be usable, should be concrete, and that's also immediately what we expect of this charter is that we can use it, that every single Flemish entity can use it when they are creating services that include AI, but also when we are buying services that use AI. And of course, we as Digitaal Vlaanderen, we want to act as the advisor, bringing that to our customers and partners. I have one last point on timing, and I know it's time. We are currently creating a roadmap for the AI Competence Center for the next coming years, together with our partners, and that should be final, let's say, in April. So that's it from my side.
Thank you very much. Next up, Laura.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for inviting me here today and allowing me to bring a slightly different perspectives on the topic today. So as you can see, I work for Brussels Environment. So it's the Brussels region, and the topic I focus on right now is sustainable IT. So maybe a first question quickly for the audience. Who is aware of the environmental impacts of the ICT sector, or who has ever heard of sustainable IT in general? Okay, so that's good. A lot of people, I won't spend too much time on this. Well, so at the Brussels Environment, we look at the ICT sector as something in general, so the focus is not only AI, of course. It's a sector that represents 4% of greenhouse gas emissions. It might sound little, but if you compare it to something we all know, it's bigger than the civil aviation. And what's really alarming with this specific sector is that it keeps growing and growing. Why? Because we are encouraged to develop more and more technologies for other purposes. If there's one thing you need to remember today from this presentation is that the building phase is the most important. So today we will also focus on the using phase, so electricity consumption, but the building phase in this whole discussion is really important to build our sensors, captors, digital equipments, devices. It requires a lot of metals. Those metals are in the Earth's crust, and it requires a lot of resources to find them. So to give you a concrete example, for a standard 2-kilogram laptop, you need about 800 kilogram natural resources. So here a bit more relevant in our context, the electricity consumption linked to the use of technologies. In Europe, it's currently 10% of our electricity that goes to the ICT sector. It's, of course, linked to the billion of devices that we are using, and all the data collected, saved, transferred to data centers. And of course, this number is also expected to increase as we see more and more devices coming and more data being used. And then to finish the cycle, you have also a lot of e-waste that we today cannot easily recycle. Okay, so today I was asked to focus also a bit more on what's happening in the Brussels region. So as you can understand, at Brussels Environment internally, we do a lot of effort, and digital sobriety, digital inclusion, and a strong data governance has always been at the heart of our internal digital transition. But and one of the first action we took to pursue this was to become member of the ISIT. I'm sure some of you are already involved. I know Digital Wallonia is. And we signed the ICT digital, the ICT sustainable ICT charter back then, which gave us a lot of inspirations to deploy our ICT strategy. Also, so in 2021, Minister of Digital Transition Bernard Clairfailly launched the initiative Régional Numérique Responsable. It's an initiative between all the different public administrations, and we are working on different working groups from buying equipments to the end of life, of also raising awareness by creating events, debates, conferences. The shifting economy led by Barbara Tracht, or Secretary of State for the Economic Transition, also refer a lot to numérique responsable, so sustainable IT, and has a lot of measures. And then in the coming PASS, Plan Air Climat Énergie, there will be a whole chapter dedicated on numérique responsable, so it's getting more and more focus, but obviously you all know that. So, yeah, the AY Charter, as I said, it's not my area of focus, but I went back to the Sustainable IT Charter we signed up 2 years ago, and I thought that no matter the technology, those principles are a good source of inspiration. It's important that we build a digital world that's sustainable for the planet and also benefit to the greatest, and that I've also heard several times today, so I'm happy that we share the same view. It has also been mentioned by you, Yves, but for me, what I really wanted to say today is to question and keep questioning, why do we develop technologies? What's the added value? Is there a need for it? Is the users asking for it and not developing technology for the sake of technology? And yeah, it was funny, the short introduction about AI and data scientists always willing to develop tools. It's key that we reflect on, based on all the elements I gave you earlier. It has an impact, so before we develop anything, services of equipment, we question. In the charter from ISIT, they suggest to link it to the UN Sustainable UN SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. For us here today, it's maybe relevant to focus on our regional or federal objectives targets and make sure those technologies answer the objectives we have put in place. And once we are sure the technology is relevant, we want to do it, there is a need. There is a way to do it. So how do we develop it? And here you could put green, inclusive, and ethical IT in it. So again, from an environmental point of view, we optimize digital tools to reduce their impact. The software, the equipment used to make those equipment work from a complete life cycle point of view. We develop, so again, accessible, inclusive offering to all. So if it requires the latest technology of a very strong connection, just let's be aware that it's not, well, everyone isn't able to follow up. I don't know in the rest of Belgium, but in Brussels we are faced with a lot of digital exclusion, so it's important, and when we speak of numérique responsable, inclusion is also part of it. And then a bit more linked to the topic today, ethical practices linked to the data we collect. And here I know it's not something this type of audience wants to hear, but collecting only data that are necessary and useful for the users and not the large amount of data, because some of them are not always relevant. And then, yeah, of course, it was also said, but to make sure we keep on track with those objectives, developing tools to measure we are able to achieve those objectives. These measures need to be transparent and available to all. And if we lose track at some point of the objectives we had decided in the first point, we keep balancing negative externalities versus positive outcomes to adjust. This is it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nathanael, you have some final reflections from the federal level?
Okay, I will go fast, because I think the most important thing is hearing to your perspective. So the context, we know that the State Secretary wants a smart nation, which is inclusive, ambitious, and convergent, meaning we are working together. That's what we do today. So there is a national plan on AI, so from the federal level, and we are supporting what is done within the region. In this context, we refer to the high-level expert group's guidelines that were coordinated by Nathalie Smua. This is the reference framework, meaning what are the ethics guidelines. And we also are currently actively taking part into the AI Act negotiation with the support of the, FPS for the economy. But I just want to mention that through the support of AI for Belgium coalition, and you are all welcome to participate into that, and AI for Belgium is now also integrated as a program within BOSA. We have already done several consultations like that, 3 position paper on the ethics guideline, on the white paper, on the AI Act, and even we did some specific note on the AI regulator. So this is not the first time we are doing like that. It's maybe a bit innovative, but it's impactful. So why a charter? We have already discussed that. The idea is we reflect together. There is the legislation, there is already ethics guideline, but here it's also a tool to commit the public services, to commit the president of the public services, but also a useful tool for every civil servant in order to apply or use solution of AI within the public administration and in the benefit of the citizen and the private companies. It's also a way to enforce or strengthen the trust we can have in these digital technologies. What we will have, and this is only a view, but a broader view, because you know that there is currently also discussion of what is exactly AI. So we have a broad acceptance of it. It's AI and algorithm in general that we will include maybe in a concrete charter with this ethical guideline. For example, generative AI or ChatGPT is included in the AI Act, but in such a way that is not so useful because the technology is going very, very fast. So how can we concrete use this kind of technologies? What are the benefits we can have, or what are the warning we can have? And just, I would like to invite you also to participate to the AI week at the end of this month from the 27th to the 31st. The opening session will take place here at 2 p.m. on Monday, and we will discuss also these various subjects. And ethics and law will be discussed on Tuesday, the whole day, but you will have on else on a different subject. You can already register. So what we should find there is clarification of uncertainties and concrete being as much possible concrete with the human in the loop. Valorize the expertise of the civil servant, but also have a way to concretely apply the AI tools within the public sector. And how? So we do a large consultation. We do, as in AI for Belgium, we have a quadruple helix approach. So this is for the public services in a broad sense, but we have an ethics by design approach. We have a multidisciplinary approach, so meaning people are coming from the academic, from the industry, from the public sector of NGOs. And just 1 second, who is coming from the public services here in the room? Okay, from the private sector? Okay, that's great. From the academia? That's so great. So it's about 1/3 for each, and the civil servant and NGOs and pure citizens are here. Okay, also, so it's 30, 30, 30, and 10%. Thank you very much, and I let you the floor. Jelle.
All right. Before we go into workshop mode, we're a bit late on time. I still would like to make one, let's say, general reflection and a question to the panel as well. And it's coming back a bit to the fact what Nathanael just hinted. We have representatives from public, from the private, from research. Citizens, not so much. And I think one thing I hear coming back is that citizen involvement is important. But according to you, what is the best way to assure we have citizen involvement in this project? We're all citizens, but yeah, we also represent different backgrounds. So, any views on that? Nathaniel?
Can you hear me? So I think this is a great starting event with people that can relate to the citizen. We are all citizens, as you told us, and maybe in the process we should have a public consultation that is more broad, and everyone here playing as a hub into getting some information from the citizen, as the European AI Alliance do, for example. Yep. But we are the key contacts towards the citizen, I think.
Yves, you have a vision on it?
Yes, I was thinking about the fact that ChatGPT is now present for every of us. I think to have a discussion about ChatGPT might be a good opportunity to have people quite interested by this topic and to discuss that. We might also think about the fact that do we need to have AI application as regard the problem of recruitment of people in private companies or at the public sector. I think that's a certain number of these topics are very interesting for people.
And maybe a second general reflection I have from the introduction and from the speeches that we heard is that there is already a lot out there. There are different charters existing. And I think we state we want to reuse the existing content that we have as much as possible. But maybe it's a triggering question, but do we need a charter for AI ethics and specifically the use in the public sector? Should we look at it more broad? How do we include things like what's happening in Brussels on sustainable ICT? What will be the interplay between potentially different charters? This is maybe a different complexity that I see. Anyone have a view on that?
I think it's important that we agree on one charter so that we can kind of enforce also the use of that charter. I think if there's many charters that can be used or should be looked at, it becomes free, like, or a free form of do we want to engage, do we want to apply everything that is written in the charter. If we agree on one, then I think as a public sector, we need to together agree on one and then kind of enforce the use for ourselves to apply it.
So a charter by itself is not enough. There needs to be a mechanism connected to it. All right, so that's where we'll cut short this panel discussion. And now it's up to all of you to give your views. I hope we triggered you a bit to participate in the discussion. So we will now start up the workshop mode. So practically, we have ideas, but we are at the current stage that we want to gather as much input from different viewpoints as possible. So that is why we will break up into smaller groups. We didn't anticipate this much interest, so it might be a bit challenging, but will be groups of around 25 people to gather your input. Can I finish first? So what we'd like to first focus on is maybe 3 key questions. First one being, what are already relevant existing initiatives? There were things referenced here. Maybe you have knowledge of specific charters or specific actions which are not yet in our scope. So we need to know as good as possible what is out there, and so we can map the field and see how we position our action in that. Specifically, and that's a sub-question there, if you don't know existing initiatives, how do you think, in general, a public administration should use an AI ethics charter? The second element, and there you can already start thinking of the structure and the content. What are the key things, according to you, which should be in there? And the third one is relating to the implementation. It's all good to have an ethics charter, but how do we put this into practice? Any thoughts, recommendations there would be highly appreciated. So how will we organize this? So we are 6 people who will, let's say, each moderate a group. As mentioned, you have a color code on your agenda, so you can match that to the color that you see here. We will divide us into this room, will be 3 groups, and the other one will be 3. So Karel will take blue. Karel, can you just wave to the crowd a bit? He will be at the far corner over there. There. Next up, we have Nele. Nele, is over there. She will take orange. Nele will go the other room at the back. And then we have Nathalie, who will take red, who will go here to the front. The doors can be closed. Rob will take black to the back over there somewhere. Nathanael can take green to the back there. And I will stay around here. All right. So also I would like to...
You can find the colors on the paper.
Yeah. So as a final point, this will be the end of the session, which will be live streamed. So unfortunately, we cannot facilitate participation there. But to the people who are following live, we'd like to thank you very much for your attention. Of course, we are open to your feedback and we monitor the chat. But if you have specific recommendations or info for us, don't hesitate to let us know. All right. I put the slide again with the key question, so please study it. We had a quick question there.
It was just the idea of making the most of it for the public, how to do it. And I was thinking of the classical ideas, just creating panels everywhere in the city and having feedback.
Yeah, but maybe it's a good thing to input during the discussion. So thanks a lot already. Okay, let's split up.